Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Front. Today, I am really excited to bring to you another live leadership lesson. Now, as always, make sure if you're wanting more sales training, motivational content, and leadership education, make sure that you're subscribing and that you click the bell so you get notified when I'm uploading new content and you won't miss anything. Now, I am going to be interviewing a good friend of mine. His name is Robb Holman, and we're going to be getting to that right after this.
Thanks for tuning in to Lead the Teams, The Front.
All right, and we are live right here on my left. I always have to figure out which direction I'm pointing on camera. Is my good friend Robb Holman, and we are going to be talking about leadership today on today's live leadership lesson from The Front. So, Robb, how are you doing today?
Mike, doing wonderful. Great to see you as always. You and I, every time we connect, whether it's, this platform or that platform, social media, whatever, we have so much synergy, so much like mind, like heart. So I can only imagine what's going to happen today, but it's a joy to be with you.
I am super excited. I'm excited because you have a new book coming out at the end of this month, right?
Yeah.
And not to get ahead of ourselves, I know there are some people that may be tuning into the show and they're not familiar with Robb Holman. So if you would, tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit about what you do, if you would, Robb.
Yeah, no, great question. So yeah, I'm what probably people would call a serial entrepreneur. I've had an opportunity and an honor and of course a joy. Those that get to know me, joy is like just such an anchor in my life, but an opportunity to start 9 different organizations in the last 20 years, 6 for-profit, 3 nonprofit. And my wife's always saying, all right, Robb, what's the next thing? And so the most recent project is my book, All In, which will be released shortly. And I'm excited to share some of those leadership principles with you today, Mike, and your audience. But I'm a lover of life. I'm a lover of people. And when those two things are infused together, that's where magic happens. That's where I believe that the most special, significant, and unique things happen in life. And so I get a chance to all this stuff deep on the inside of me, deep convictions of the heart, passion areas for people to be all that they're truly created to be, and leaders to lead with confidence. But at the same time, anchored in humility is a big deal for me because we're all here to make the world a better place. And we can do that person by person, one person at a time.
That is absolutely excellent, man. I absolutely agree with you. Well, while we're talking leadership and you're folding that in, and I do want to get to some points in the book. I have it sitting right here. I got a little preview copy. I'm actually going to ask you a question from this here in a little bit, or maybe two. Because I've been reading through it. Absolutely excellent. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for you for that at the end of the month here. How do you define leadership? Can you give some specifics? Like, what are some key traits, some key characteristics? How does Robb Holman define that?
Well, I think one of the things that help define it is of what leadership is not. Leadership is not just merely a title.
Right.
It's not nearly, hey, I am a leader, and telling people that you're a leader and you have it on your business card. A leader, there's one word that I use to describe leadership or being a leader, and that's influence. And I'm a firm believer, Mike, that it begins with in function. It's about function before form. That, again, it's not about the title. It's not about, it is literally about, are you influencing those in your sphere of influence? And there could be good leaders, there could be bad leaders, and all the leaders in between. But I feel as though, and I'm under the strong conviction that the most effective and, dare I say, transformational leaders are ones that understand that they have a sphere of influence, those that look to them, those that follow without them even having to do a whole lot, and then utilize that for greater good at the end of the day.
No, and I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you. I love these shows. I find myself, they say iron sharpens iron, that it's like you make a point and I should make a counterpoint, right? Problem is we're in alignment. So it's like, no, you're right. Okay, next question, right? So when you're talking, leadership is influence at its core. And I know I've heard you say that. I've said that. There's many big leadership speakers and trainers that share that same sort of philosophy. How can one develop more influence? What are some methods you think that, especially somebody that's new, could do to be developing their influence more?
Yeah, a lot of times people tend to look on the outside, like what techniques or strategies can I do to improve my leadership so that therefore, or as a natural result, more people are following me.
Mm-hmm.
And I say no to that. I think the greatest way is learning to lead from the inside, only to have it work itself out. And what I mean by that, Mike, is I'm all about personal stewardship. You like how I work in my inside out leadership language and philosophy?
I do. I absolutely do.
So I'm a big proponent of personal stewardship. When you steward who you are really well, and that means like being on point with who you are, how you're wired, the skill set that you have, the passions in life, an understanding of your life story and owning it and beginning to shout it to the world, so to speak. When you fully embrace and you engage who you are, you can't help but become like a fire hydrant of life and positivity, etc. And other people just want to follow passionate people and people that know who they are. And so I feel like the healthiest form of a leader and the most effective form of leadership begins in and out of you. And then, as a natural result, people can't help but take notice. They start following, and then you try to wrap your arms around some of that and try to employ some strategies and techniques, because those things aren't bad. I think many leaders, they want to become more of an effective leader, so they're quick to go a little bit more on the outside techniques and strategies, trying to get into the heart of those that are in their sphere of influence. But you can never go wrong with starting with yourself, and then out of that place, things begin to happen.
And that's the core actually of your first book, where you're talking about start inside and work your way out versus the other way around. And I know you're very humble, so you won't say it, so I will. So if you haven't seen or heard of Robb's first book, Inside Out Leadership, check that out too. A little plug there. So let me ask you, when did you realize, because it takes a lot to author a book. It's one thing to have those characteristics and say, oh, hey, I'm doing this. But to actually be able to verbalize it, to be able to put that on paper, and to be able to bring it from your inside out to the rest of the world, when did you realize that you were being viewed as a leader, and how did you kind of evolve to be able to pull that out of yourself? Just because I think that would help. I'm sorry, but I think that would really help some of the people that watch this show that are up and coming leaders, that they're saying, well, am I doing this right? How can I approach this? And sometimes it's good for us to hear how other people got started out as well.
Yeah, I think a great place to start is have a time of reflection. Go back into your childhood, adolescent years, college, whatever. Just go back in time and start to reflect a little bit on, the people that you led. What did that look like? Was there something you started and people started to jump on board? Was it doesn't have to be something extreme or something large. It could be something really small or subtle. But what are when people followed you, why? What were you doing? What were you not doing? Were you confident? Were you lacking self-esteem? I mean, just visit or revisit certain places of your past. And I think hopefully when you do a deeper dive into some of that, you can be encouraged by some of the things that you started, the ways that some people followed you, and you can learn. I think one of the greatest learning tools is to go back and reflect, not camp out there terribly long, but go back there long enough to determine some things, to breathe some fresh encouragement and inspiration into the here and now, so you can effectively lead people in ways that you never even thought were possible. I think so many times people will just start with where I am today. And if I just kind of implement this or that, now I'm off and running with being a good or an effective leader. But again, reflection can be an extremely powerful tool to utilize. Again, don't focus on the bad as much as the good, but we do need to also look at the ways that we maybe could have been a more effective leader. And so I can't help but go back in my own past to model what I'm talking about. And I remember I was in elementary school. And a little fun fact about Robb is I did the first commercial for the original game show Double Dare. Double Dare is a family game show that started back in the 80s. And I remember I wasn't smart enough, Mike, back then to actually go on the game show and answer the tough questions. However, one of my teachers in elementary school kind of pulled me aside after class one day and said, "Hey, Robb, we noticed that a lot of kids follow you. And we were wondering if you'd be willing and able, you'd be open to the idea of being on the first commercial for the game show Double Dare." And can you imagine as a fifth or
That
sixth
is
grader, I'm
awesome.
like inside, I'm like, are you kidding me? Yes. And it was, and then she continued to say, hey, by the way, if you say yes, I believe you probably will. If you say yes, you get $100 in cash. You get fully decked out in Reebok gear, and
Yeah.
you get to go into Philadelphia into the studio all day and record. I'm like, I think I was in, and dare I say, I think I was all in, Mike.
Double dare. You say you were all in, right? Hey, so that poses a really good question because I didn't know that about you. That's kind of a cool little tidbit of information that you were on the first double dare. So moving into a little bit, not to dwell on this because it's not out yet, but that brings up a good question because you have directly written in here one of the questions. I'm going to pose it to this forum a little bit, but what would you say are some other milestones other than the double dare instance and the other kids following you? What milestones or what other milestones have you experienced, maybe two or three, in your life that you would say, hey, this put me into the place and into the position that I'm in?
Yeah. I was an avid athlete. I played multiple sports in junior high, high school, and I landed on playing basketball. So sports for me, Mike, not only was it an outlet to deal with my stress, anxiety, and everything else a teenager goes through, but it also was very telling about how I would respond to certain events, the good, the bad, the ugly. How would I, if we lost a game in high school? So I can't help but go back to some of my middle school and high school basketball games to address your question specifically. And I remember certain circumstances where we were down and out. We were losing by 20 points, for instance. And I would have, an opportunity with the team when I saw a lot of heads just, hanging low. And maybe we were in the fourth quarter and we're down by 20 to say, this game's not over. Guys, get your head in the game. We still have an opportunity. We still have a chance. So I didn't even realize until I was put into some challenging situations. For me, a lot of them happened in sports and namely basketball, because that's the sport I really started to hone in on, especially in high school, heading into college. But that's when you find out kind of what you're made of. And so someone might be listening or watching this, and they may find themselves in a bit of a challenge. They may have an obstacle, and they can go back and look and reflect in their own life of some obstacles and how do they handle it? Did people look to them? How did they lead themselves in and out of that place? And every time we face a trial, tribulation, an obstacle, barrier, call it whatever you want, there's always an amazing opportunity for you to lead yourself more effectively, and also those that are looking for a little bit of guidance, a little bit of help, or maybe just a raised chin to say it's going to be all right. So for me, I can't help but think of some of these really trying. Now, listen, basketball's basketball. It wasn't like someone was dying, but
Right.
nonetheless, for a teenager, and you're down by 20, your team's not doing well, that's a pretty big deal. At least it was for me.
It's a huge deal. I think that one of the things you hit on, and again, this is where you and I connect on a lot. There is a lot. There's a lot of value in, like you said, kind of at the tail end there, where if somebody just has their chin up and tells you it's going to be okay, at the time, especially where you're looking at middle school, high school basketball, you don't know that. You can't see beyond the other 45 minutes that's going on, right? And so for somebody to say, hey, it'll be all right, I think there's so much value in that. And then fast forward, putting that into leadership, into a leadership perspective, putting that into a business environment. I think there are often a lot of leaders that don't do some of those simple things. You can look at your staff and say, hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to make it through this, right? It's like the Jewish sages say, right? This too shall pass.
That's
So,
right.
and so often, as people that are in business and leadership, or it'd be like in your high school career, college career, there were probably some coaches that didn't do a good job at that. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. We all have had our good fair share of good bosses, good coaches, and not so good bosses and coaches too.
And so, and I won't put you on the spot with that one. So what happens?
Now, Mike.
Well, but that's an opportunity for other people, at that peer level to step up and take on a leadership role. Sometimes not even intentionally, as you mentioned. How about a time after college? Is there something? I mean, being a serial entrepreneur, I know you've seen your share of trials and tribulations, and you've seen your share of successes. Um,
Yep.
so maybe one time after college, that what's a milestone there that you can say, man, this really made a difference. This really helped build me up as well.
Yeah, I think it was when a friend of mine had cancer.
Ooh,
And this is a bit more of an extreme illustration. I stayed a little bit more general with my basketball, but I think it's a good question. Post
sure.
college, friend of mine, I get a call, and he lived in a different state, and he didn't have too many places he could turn, but he knew he could call me, and he felt really alone, and he was dying of an aggressive form of cancer, and he knew he could call me. And I remember throughout not just one particular conversation, but a series of them over a season of time post college. And this is in my young entrepreneurial career. I had a couple businesses at the time. And I made a commitment to myself that I'm going to do whatever I could, even with the distance that stood in our play. We weren't right around the corner from each other. And so, but I was going to take the calls from him. I was going to initiate calls with him. I did not want him to feel alone. So I had an opportunity, Mike, to lead my friend when he felt very alone and didn't have a whole lot of people. But how I led him was through truly servant leadership, is coming alongside of him to provide a listening ear, to be a source of encouragement and inspiration to him, to kind of talk to him on the phone and be like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but you're going to get through this. You're going to be all right. And I was one voice in his life that he could count on. And so I say that to say, sometimes we think leadership is about leading the masses. And I have found that when you're faithful with leading the one, coming alongside the one and lifting them up, that you'll reach the masses if you're faithful in reaching the one.
Man, that's a powerful message. It's a powerful story, and
Yeah.
a powerful message. And I think you're absolutely right. I've shared that thought. We've I think shared a similar thought, that it's, so often people are worried about, look, how can I, and you said this at the very beginning, how can I reach all of these people? How can I influence all of these people? But and especially we get this illusion because of social media and as many people as are our friends as we're connected to online, that it is about numbers. It's about likes. It's about the number of subscribers, or gosh, how many people bought my new book? And we get tied up in the numbers, and we become numb to the humanity of it.
Mike, that's a great point, because activity, just pure activity, does not equate to good activity.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, you bring up a wonderful point that, there's nothing wrong with momentum, enhancement, multiplication, growth. We're made for it. Human beings are made for all that stuff. It's how, and I'm going to put how in big capital HOW, that matters. And I'm going to get back or come full circle to influence. That's how I define leadership. But influence not in, again, reaching the masses. It's a depth of influence. And when you can begin to take that energy that you would exhaust yourself in trying to reach the masses, imagine if you took all that energy, all that attention that you give that, and channel that into the one that's before you. And coming alongside of that one, again, like I did with my friend that had cancer, and coming alongside to engage in active listening, being a shoulder to cry on, so to speak, to be present, to truly connect with them as though they're the only person on planet Earth in that time or in that season. And in the midst of that, there's an exchange of life, human to human, not just professional to professional. And I always say this, good organizations, they create and develop professional development tracks for their people. But great and extraordinary organizations, they develop their people and a personal development track for their people, only to see that infused into their profession. So we've got to make it about people first as human beings, and really begin to engage and connect with them very intentionally and very consistently. And as a natural result of that, there's bound to be positive fruit in time. We just have to be patient, and we got to believe in it.
That's great. It's build the people, they'll help build the business, right? They'll build so much more. So fast forward here, because I do want to ask a couple questions specific to your new book, All In. So first off, why the name All In? How did you decide on that?
I just find so many people are half in. They got one leg in the game. They got the other, just over here enjoying a little bit of life over there. You get, I mean, I find that the average person is not nearly as committed as they should, need to be, etc. And I've just taken through my own entrepreneurial experience throughout the last 22 years, as well as statistical data. I want people to be all in. And I can't help but take a look at the closest relationships to me. Like, all right, so I first started with like my wife and I. Like, what makes us be all in together? And what has happened in our past to where we weren't as all in as we thought? And then start to take a look at some closer relationships to me and different aspects of my life: family, friends, neighbors, and how about workplace? How about the team members that are all working towards a similar or common goal and vision? And so, Mike, I just want to see people begin to trust one another, because trust is one of those things I have found that if we don't have trust within team relationships, we really don't have much of anything. But when we have trust that has been built properly and fostered properly over a period of time, now I got your back, you got mine, and we're going to go and accomplish the impossible together. So really the book and All In, it lays out some things that I've learned, and based on research, based on experience, and I really have a combination of both that lays out, okay, if we want to build and foster trust, what are some things we need to keep in mind? What are some life-changing principles that we can utilize in our life that make a world of difference, and ultimately have us and those in our sphere of influence say, we're putting it all on the table and we're all in.
I love that. And you and I were talking a little bit right before we went live here, talking about how you build the foundation in the first chapter of the book, and you're talking about that foundation, how trust is foundational. And I think it is awesome that you lead into the new book that way. So I'm gonna get maybe a little off track, because that's how my brain rolls. How different was it writing this second book from the first one? What did you learn in the process? What changes? Because these are two different books for sure. How different was it writing this one compared to the first one?
The second one was a whole lot easier, and I'll explain why in a minute.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
This is an odd illustration. You probably don't want to hear it, but it was like the first one. It was like I was giving birth to an elephant. I literally, because I never done it before. I know, probably something you don't want to think about, but it's because, like many of us, when we engage in a work or a project that is somewhat unfamiliar to us, we've just never done it before. I'm a father of 3 children, right?
Right.
Now, I did not give birth to our 3 children. I supported the one who did, and my wife. And my hat goes off to her, and I don't have a clue of what it's like.
Yeah, he's not taking anything from you, Karen, right?
No, not at all. But, we can read, getting ready and preparing ourselves to have children. We can talk to as many people that have gone before us that had kids. Mm-hmm. We can interview them. We can read as many books as we want about the process, about the development and everything. But until, Mike, we have our first, it's a new thing. It's
100%. 100%.
So for me, writing was a new thing. I'm more, if you can't tell, and of course you know me well, I'm more of a verbal communicator. I'm a very passionate guy. And so speaking for me it's just kind of who I am. It comes off, very naturally, at least in my own heart. Writing, though, is harder work for me, because I feel like when I put my fingertips to the keyboard, I feel like I've got to write the 50 pages that are in my heart all at one time. And I become exacerbated just in that process of thinking through it. And so the first book, I was like, oh my goodness, this is all new. I'm sitting at my desk trying to crank through stuff. Nothing would come. And then I'm in the shower, I'm in the car, and I'd have an epiphany, and I'd reflect, and all of a sudden the words would come. And it was all a new process to me. And so by the time the second,
if I may, it's hard, because I feel you there, man. It's hard because you're staring at this black and white text that is emotionless on the screen. It doesn't matter how much you type. How can I get what's in here onto the screen? Yeah. How can I do that? So that the emotion is so it's there, and you think it's there, because I do some blogging, a little bit of writing. So I truly understand that. But then you read it back and you're like, did I get the emotion across?
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Oh,
and so
man.
the process. So, I mean, it's good to hear you because I think most people are like that. I mean, very few people I know that are just like, they get it. It flows all the time. I'm sure there are those individuals out there.
Yeah.
It's just not me. It's not us. And so it was a big learning curve. And I found out what works best for me and what doesn't work is good for me. Like, I'll give you an example. For me, transcribing some of my talks, keynotes, because as you know, I do give a lot of keynote talks, a lot of inspirational talks or trainings. And so I have found that if I can get an MP3 or a video, an MP4 of those talks, then I can go to a place like rev.com, and there's tons of different resources out there where 99% accurate in taking all your content and then transcribing it. And now, Mike, now all of a sudden I have pages and pages of core content that now I can go in and not feel like I have to start from scratch, but now I can go in and massage that content. I can make some tweaks, make some enhancements, and it's made for a much easier process for me. So now learning that coming out of book 1, I implemented that into All In book number 2. And now I feel like there's so much momentum, like writing is just kind of who I am now, as opposed to just something that I did in book 1. Now it's becoming more of who I am. And I'm already starting to write book 3 because it's like I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I take a shower, I start writing some content. Whereas before it wasn't necessarily like that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. The funny thing is how as we evolve, we evolve in any piece of our life. You went from being like Robb Holman speaker to now you're like, well, I'm Robb Holman author. Maybe you didn't know. right. Yeah. But you associate that and you start to become that. So I could see how you're saying it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah. So and therefore, in light of your earlier question, it was very enjoyable writing the first book, but it was a lot harder work. This time around, it's equally, if not even more enjoyable, but there's an ease with it.
Sure.
And so in the midst of that now, it's, I don't know, it's like it breathes fresh air into it and I'm much lighter going through the process. And I think as a natural result, I don't know, we'll see what readers have to say. Maybe I'm even making a little bit more sense this book than I did the prior.
I'm loving it so far, man. I am not completed with it yet, but I'm loving where you're headed with it. I think you did a fantastic job with the way you communicated, and I do think you got the emotion across in the pages right from the beginning forward is great. So two kind of last leadership questions to put a bow tie on this here. Do you think society is evolving, or let me reword this. Do you think as society is evolving that leadership characteristics and traits are evolving as well?
I do. I really do. I think that the rah-rah leader of 20 years ago, I'll just use 20 as an example.
Sure.
A charismatic personality that can wow the crowds and say, here's the vision, here's where I'm going. You're either on board with me or you're not. And we're going to go and climb the mountain. That used to be 20 or so years ago, and they used to work. We're different generation, different people, different world circumstances. Now, and I want to see, Mike, if you agree with this. Now I feel like there's a different kind of a leader that is truly coming about. One that does lead by example. And not to say the charismatic leader 20 years ago didn't, but again, they could wow the crowds, do the dog and pony show, sweep people off their feet, and we're going to go and do this thing. I feel like now people want authenticity like never before. They want to see that someone not only speaks their message, but is their message. And now there's not this, an opportunity to be as hypocritical. Because when you are the message and you begin to speak the message now, there's not mixed messaging. There is an opportunity to be that example that you truly want others to be in your sphere of influence. And so I'm finding that leaders now, and I'll make an argument, leaders never really had to be charismatic, but in our culture that people are wowed by the crowds, I think naturally people gravitate in that direction. Now I think people are not just more open to different types of leadership, but I think people embrace a leader that leads by example more than any other time, that lives out of a place of authenticity, that really walks the walk. And when appropriate, they use words that can
Hmm.
help people and help lead people in a more effective way and direction. So I think that also invites shared vision like never before. So, really, a leader that is confident in who they are, a good steward of who they are, again, more of that inside out leader that is not threatened by the creative ideas of others, that actually openly engage with a team member or the team collectively,
Hmm.
and look for ideas that they're not threatened by, and actually are hoping that the team members and team as a whole actually have bigger and brighter ideas than them. In the midst of that, now people are feeling empowered that everyone on the team has a voice, and collectively we have one giant voice that we are going to shout to the industry and to the market to offer that product or service that people desperately need. So I think now more than ever, there is an openness and a receptivity to a whole different kind of leader or leadership styles in the midst of where we are.
I could see that. I think more so the style, because I think that some of the traits and some of the characteristics, they're always going to be there. There are pieces that natural, whether you want to call them natural born leaders. I think leadership can be learned, but I do think as it becomes more, I think you said earlier, as everything becomes more transparent. There no longer can a leader say, "Hey, you got to go do this," and then I'm going to go in my office and shut the door, and hopefully it gets done. And if it doesn't, then that's on you. At this point, if it doesn't get done, you have to be able to demonstrate. You got to be able to do as well as you say. So
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. There's a little bit of an evolution in the style there, I think.
And I agree. And Mike, one other point real
Yeah.
quick. I get a lot of questions about the millennials, about Gen
Yeah.
Z, about the younger, right? Because they're the up and coming.
Hmm.
They're big time influencers.
Absolutely.
And I think too, these leadership styles, like I like how you put that, those kind of leadership styles, you know, a lot of the younger generation, they're kind of sick and tired of being told what to do. Even though we can make an argument, sometimes they should, be told what to do, but they want to be involved in a conversation, an ongoing conversation. And so anything we can do as leaders to again invite those in our sphere of influence, regardless of the age, but especially the younger, engage them in ongoing conversation with creative ideas, the shared vision process, the purpose of the business, the organization, et cetera, because now they have an opportunity to step in and begin being empowered like never before. And they want a voice, they want to be heard. And if we have a posture as leaders to go in to try to learn just as much from those in our midst than we have to offer, I think
Sure.
everyone's going to be better for it.
Well, and I think you hit on something. You were saying they want to know more than just what to do. Then you brought up vision. I think vision creates the why for this next generation of people. When people know why they're doing something, then they're less afraid of the how also. They're saying, okay, well, how can I? But the key is, if they don't know the how, you as a leader, for the people that are watching this, if they don't know the how, you as a leader, you got to step up. You got to show them how.
You do.
They're okay with the what if you'll give them the why and you'll show them the how.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
kind of bringing us to a close here, Rob. First off, man, thank you so much for spending time with me on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. Like you said, I don't remember if we said at the beginning of the show or while we were talking before the beginning, but when you and I get together, there's always a lot of energy and synergy, and it's always great to have a conversation with you, man.
No, it's totally mutual. And I love the work that you're doing with the
Thank you.
leadership training that you're doing and the voice that's becoming louder and louder of greater and deeper influence, Mike. I learned quite a bit from you every time we talk, every time I hear of you, every time I get your leadership videos. Honestly, I learn a great deal. And you're a pioneer in your own right. And I just thanks for doing what you do and the influence that you have in my life and the lives of so many people around. So thank you.
Absolutely. Hey, before we go, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Rob?
Yeah, I'd probably say two ways. One would be robholman.com.
It's on
And
the
that's a
screen.
centralized place, for all my inside out leadership content and opportunities. If you're interested in having me come to speak, all that information on speaking topics and even highlight videos, you'll find it there, robbholman.com. Second area would probably be getallinbook.com. That's my new book website that has all the content, some of which Mike and I discussed today. And you'll even see endorsements from some of the top leadership thinkers in the world, which I'm just so humbled by and so honored by. So those are probably the two best resources, Mike.
Fantastic. Well, Robb, thank you again. And I would encourage you, for anybody watching this, if you are not connected with Robb, check out his website, check out his books, check out his training, more of his speaking and content that's online. Robb's just, you truly are a servant leader and a leader of leaders. I think you're just an absolutely awesome individual, Robb, and I appreciate calling you a friend, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, man. Honored to be with you.
Absolutely. Hey, so that is going to bring us to a close for another live leadership lesson from the front. Do me a favor, if you didn't at the beginning, please make sure that you click the subscribe button, click that bell so that you get notified as I'm uploading new content, as I'm sharing new interviews like this with my friend Robb Holman and so many other great leaders from other great verticals of business and leadership. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. And I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. We'll talk to you soon, everybody.